A British weapon so strange it was called an alien tore across the North African desert. It unleashed more than 1,000 rounds per minute from the back of a speeding jeep. Almost overnight, German airfields became deadly traps. Aircraft were destroyed before pilots could reach them. Entire squadrons were lost in seconds. Defenders were paralysed by a sound they had never faced. How did a rejected aircraft machine gun become the most feared and misunderstood weapon in occupied Europe? The answer upends everything we think we know about World War II special operations. Every target in the North African desert came with its own ticking clock. German airfields scattered across the sand were most vulnerable in the brief window when aircraft lined up for refuelling or maintenance. Convoys paused just long enough to take on water or repair a tyre, never more than a few minutes before engines started again and the column moved on. For British raiders, these short moments were the only chance to strike. Patrols could spend hours crawling across empty desert, only to have 5, maybe 10 minutes where the enemy was exposed. Any longer, and alarms would spread, defences would harden, and the chance would vanish. Timing was everything. On a typical night, the crew of a Special Air Service jeep waited just beyond the edge of light, watching the glow of lanterns as Luftwaffe ground crews fueled bombers. The entire attack had to unfold before the Germans could react, before the first shout, before the first searchlight swept the sand. If the raiders hesitated, the window slammed shut. The same pressure ruled attacks on supply depots and moving convoys. Trucks might stop to refuel or unload for a handful of minutes, but the next leg of their journey was always looming. Raiding parties needed to hit hard and disappear before the enemy could organise a defence or call for help. There was no time for prolonged firefights or wrestling with heavy equipment. Success depended on unleashing maximum destruction in seconds, then vanishing into the desert night. Every detail, route, timing, weapon had to answer the same demand: deliver overwhelming shock before the clock ran out. In North Africa, the difference between a legendary raid and a missed opportunity was measured not in hours, but in the handful of minutes when the enemy let down their guard. Standard British infantry weapons could not keep up with the demands of desert raiding. The Bren gun, chosen for its accuracy and reliability, fired at a measured pace, about 500 rounds per minute. In a stationary fight, that precision mattered, but in the chaos of a jeep raid, it was a liability. By the time a gunner lined up a careful burst, the window for attack might already be closing. The Bren's top-mounted box magazine held just 30 rounds, and each reload cost precious seconds. For the SAS and long-range desert group, who needed to unleash devastation and disappear before the enemy could react, that was simply too slow. Medium machine guns like the Vickers water-cooled .303 had the firepower to sweep a line of parked aircraft or trucks. But at 35 pounds, plus a heavy tripod and a water can, they were built for static defence, not for bouncing across dunes at 40 miles per hour. Setting up such a weapon took time and extra hands. In a raid, that meant trading speed for firepower and risking the entire patrol if the gun jammed or needed to be moved quickly. The same weight that made it steady on a trench line made it a burden in the open desert. Even the Bren, at about 22 pounds, was awkward to handle while standing in the back of a moving jeep. No matter how skilled the crew, neither the Bren nor the Vickers medium machine gun could deliver the sudden, overwhelming volume of fire needed to erase a target before the alarm sounded. Both were designed for battles of endurance, not for the hit-and-run tactics that defined special operations in North Africa. The gap was clear. Raiders needed a weapon that could flood a target with bullets in seconds, not minutes, and keep moving without being weighed down. The answer would come from an unexpected place. An aircraft gun built for a different kind of war, waiting in British depots for a new purpose. In the decade before war swept across North Africa, British engineers searched for a new kind of machine gun, one that could handle the demands of modern aerial combat. The Vickers gas-operated gun, later known as the Vickers K, began life in the 1930s as a contender for the Army's next light machine gun. It lost out to the Czech-designed Bren, but Vickers Armstrong did not abandon the design. Instead, they reworked it for the Royal Air Force, aiming to replace the aging Lewis guns in observer turrets and flexible aircraft mounts. The result was a gun built to thrive in chaos, gas-operated, air-cooled, and firing from an open bolt. It shrugged off vibration, dust, and the sudden shocks of flight. Royal Air Force planners wanted firepower that could fill the sky with bullets in the split second an enemy fighter flashed past. The Vickers K delivered, cycling at a rate that seemed almost reckless, well over 900 rounds per minute. But what looked like an advantage on paper soon became a problem in the air. The gun's appetite for ammunition was ferocious. Drum magazines emptied in seconds, and the high rate of fire made careful aiming almost impossible. As aircraft armament evolved, the Royal Air Force turned to belt-fed Brownings and 20mm cannons that could sustain fire longer and fit more easily into wings and turrets. The Vickers K, once a hopeful star, became surplus almost overnight. By the early 1940s, British depots held racks of these aircraft guns, their future uncertain. The Army had no standard role for them, and the Air Force had moved on. Yet the same qualities that made the Vickers K awkward for aerial dogfights also made it attractive on the ground. Its compact size, its ability to keep working in rough conditions, and its near unmatched rate of fire caught the attention of ground commanders facing a different kind of war. For the Special Air Service and the Long Range Desert Group, these surplus guns offered a rare opportunity, a weapon built for extremes and waiting for a new battlefield. The Vickers K was engineered for a world where hesitation meant failure. Its most defining trait was speed, mechanical, relentless speed. Where most infantry machine guns of the era cycled at a measured pace, the K delivered a torrent of bullets at a rate between 950 and 1,200 rounds per minute. That is 16 to 20 rounds every second, enough to empty a 100-round drum in less than 6 seconds. In the hands of a determined gunner, this translated to a near solid stream of fire, sweeping across targets before defenders could react. This ferocity came from a gas-operated action, firing from an open bolt in a simple, robust mechanism designed to shrug off vibration and dust. The gun's lightweight profile, just under 30 pounds, made it easy to pivot from one target to the next, even while mounted on a moving vehicle. Its compact length, just under 40 inches, meant it could be fitted in pairs or sets of 4 on the narrow frames of jeeps, with each gun fed by a top-mounted drum magazine. These drums, holding up to 10303 British cartridges, were originally designed for aircraft gunners fighting in the slipstream, but in the desert they provided the raw material for chaos. The high cyclic rate was not just a number on a page, it shaped every aspect of how the weapon was used. This ferocity, expressed in short savage bursts, allowed the K to cut through rows of parked aircraft, fuel drums or trucks in the time it took a sentry to raise the alarm. The roar of overlapping guns, each spitting out tracers, created a wall of noise and light that overwhelmed defenders and blinded counterfire. Magazine changes came fast and often, but the gun's design made them routine even under pressure. Where other weapons jammed or overheated, the K's air-cooled barrel and rugged internals kept it firing in the worst desert conditions. Every technical detail, rate, feed, weight served a single purpose: to deliver maximum destruction in the shortest possible window. For special forces in North Africa, this was more than engineering. It was the answer to the problem of time itself. Aircraft designers never expected their guns to be dragged through the sand, bounced across dunes, or fired from the back of a speeding jeep. Yet the Vickers K, born for the chaos of aerial combat, proved almost stubbornly reliable on the ground. At just under 30 pounds, it was light enough for a single man to handle but strong enough to survive the pounding of rough terrain. Its gas piston system, inherited from the Vickers Berthier, was built to shrug off the constant vibration and turbulence of flight. In the desert, that same mechanism kept the gun running when fine sand clogged other weapons and the heat warped lesser metals. The open bolt action and air-cooled barrel turned out to be a perfect match for North Africa's extremes. Where other guns faltered after a few bursts in the midday sun, the case kept firing, its internals engineered to avoid overheating even without water or elaborate cooling systems. Frequent magazine changes were not just a necessity, they were an expectation, built into the rhythm of the gun's use. Gunners could swap out a spent drum and slam in a fresh one with practiced speed, rarely losing more than a few seconds. Dust storms, temperature swings, and the relentless jolt of cross-desert travel all tested the limits of every weapon. The K's compact frame and robust construction absorbed the punishment. Its parts fit together with enough precision to ensure smooth cycling, but not so tightly that a bit of grit or heat expansion would cause a jam. Mechanics in the field praised the gun's ability to keep working after days without a proper cleaning, an advantage that could mean the difference between escape and disaster. Every element of the Vickers K's design, from its weight of 29.5 pounds to its gas-operated resilience, made it more than just a leftover from the RAF. In the hands of a desert raider, it was a weapon built for abuse, thriving in the same harsh conditions that broke lesser arms. Desert jeeps, stripped to the essentials, became moving gun platforms built for one purpose: to deliver as much firepower as possible in the shortest time. Mechanics in the field improvised with whatever they could find: Royal Air Force aircraft mounts, scraps of steel, even salvaged bombers, to bolt Vickers K guns onto pintle mounts. The most common setup placed 2 K guns side by side at the front, angled forward, with another pair sometimes mounted at the rear or offset for sweeping fire. Each pintle mount allowed the gunner to pivot quickly, tracking targets as the jeep bounced over rough ground. Every crew member had a role. The driver focused on keeping a steady line through darkness or dust, often relying on the passenger to spot targets and call out threats. The front passenger handled the twin guns, standing or half kneeling to control both spade grips at once. In the rear, a gunner managed his own pair, watching for sudden movement from the flanks or rear. Reloaders, sometimes the same men, hauled biscuit tins packed with pan magazines, each holding up to 100 rounds. These tins sat wedged between fuel cans, water bottles, and demolition charges. Every few seconds, a spent drum had to be yanked free and a fresh one slammed into place. The rhythm was practiced until it was second nature. Jeep bodies were reinforced at the mounting points to handle recoil. The open design left gunners exposed, but that was the price of speed and coverage. Without windshields or excess bodywork, nothing blocked a gunner's view or got in the way during a magazine change. The spade grips and simple iron sights, borrowed straight from aircraft use, let crews fire on the move, even as the vehicle jolted across sand and gravel. There were no stabilizers, no elaborate optics, just raw coordination between driver and gunner, trusting in muscle memory and the sheer density of fire. A single jeep with twin K guns could unleash over 2,000 rounds per minute. In a full patrol, the combined fire from a dozen vehicles created a wall of tracers that erased targets before defenders could react. The choreography was relentless. Drive in, unleash a storm of bullets, reload in seconds, and keep moving. Every detail, from the shape of the mounts to the way ammunition was stowed, reflected the same logic: maximum destruction, minimum delay. Night in the Western Desert offered no shelter for the Luftwaffe at Sidi Haneish. On July 26, 1942, 18 jeeps, each bristling with Vickers machine guns, slipped across the sand, carrying 60 men under the command of David Stirling. Their destination was a sprawling airfield crowded with German bombers, transports and fighters. The approach was silent, headlights off, engines muffled by the open desert. As the jeeps drew near, runway lights snapped on for a late arriving bomber, illuminating rows of parked aircraft and giving the raiders all the targeting they needed. Stirling fired a green flare. In an instant, the jeeps surged forward in a wide V formation, guns erupting with a storm of tracer fire. Twin and quadruple K guns spat streams of bullets at over 1,000 rounds per minute, sweeping across the airfield in overlapping arcs. Aircraft wings shattered, fuel tanks burst, and engines caught fire before the first German sentry could shout a warning. The sound was deafening, a rolling thunder that drowned out the chaos it created. Within minutes, the airfield was transformed. Flames climbed from at least 37 aircraft. Junkers, Ju-87s, Ju-52s, Messerschmitt, each one ripped open by concentrated fire or demolition charges. Fuel dumps exploded, lighting the night for miles. German defenders scattered in confusion, unable to pinpoint the attackers in the glare and smoke. The Vickers K's relentless rate of fire erased targets faster than any static gun could manage. For the defenders, the attack seemed to come from everywhere at once and ended before they could organise a response. Only one jeep was disabled in the assault. Its gunner, Lance Bombardier John Robson, killed at his post. The rest of the force withdrew in small groups, jeeps weaving away through plumes of dust and fire. By dawn, 15 vehicles and nearly all the men had slipped back into the desert, leaving behind a graveyard of German aircraft and a shaken enemy command. The Sidi Haneish raid became a legend, not for its scale, but for the sheer speed and violence delivered by a handful of men and their aircraft guns turned desert weapons. Retreat was never an afterthought for the SAS and LRDG. The moment the last drum of tracer ammunition swept across a burning aircraft, every crew switched to escape mode. Withdrawal was a drill as practiced as the attack itself. Engines roared to life, jeeps peeled away in small groups, weaving through the chaos they had just unleashed. In the confusion, gunners kept up short savage bursts, not to destroy but to blind and pin down any defenders who might give chase. Tracer fire stitched across the airfield's edge, forcing German troops to hit the ground or scatter, buying precious seconds for the raiders. Speed was the only shield. Jeeps accelerated hard, headlights still dark, relying on compass bearings and memory to vanish into the open desert. Each vehicle picked its own line, zigzagging to avoid return fire or obstacles left behind in the panic. The Vickers K guns, still hot from the assault, were fired in controlled bursts behind the fleeing columns, laying down a curtain of noise and light. The aim was not to win a firefight, it was to create confusion, to make every German defender think twice before following into the dark. Once clear of the airfield, the raiders faced a new danger. German aircraft would soon be hunting at first light. Crews headed for pre-selected hide sites, often miles from the target, where camouflage nets and the natural folds of the desert hid jeeps from overhead patrols. Engines were shut down, sand brushed over tyre tracks, and every man knew to stay silent until the heat of day passed. The rhythm of these escapes was as relentless as the raids themselves. Attack, withdraw, disappear, survive, until nightfall gave cover for the next move. Every detail of the exit was shaped by necessity. Ammunition was rationed for the retreat, magazines were counted and swapped in the dark, and every crew member had a role: driver, gunner, lookout, reloader. The Vickers K, so hungry for rounds during the attack, became a lifeline. Its roar warned off pursuers and masked the jeep's retreat. In those minutes after the strike, survival depended on speed, discipline, and the ability to vanish before the enemy could organise a response. For the Germans, the attack was over before it had truly begun. For the raiders, the real test had just started. The first burst from a Vickers K machine gun in the darkness was nothing short of a sensory assault. German sentries waiting in the quiet before dawn felt the ground shudder as a wall of sound crashed over them. The gun's staccato roar, over 1,000 rounds per minute, swept across the airfield, drowning out shouted orders and alarms. Tracer rounds, loaded heavy for night raids, stitched burning lines through the gloom. Each burst painted the darkness with arcs of red and white, turning parked aircraft into silhouettes caught in a lightning storm. For defenders, the attack was blinding and deafening. The sheer volume of fire made it impossible to tell where the enemy was. Some shouted warnings, others dropped to the ground, but most could only flinch or freeze. The overlapping bursts from multiple jeeps produced a continuous rolling thunder, so loud and rapid that it seemed to come from every direction at once. In those first seconds, the difference between safety and disaster vanished. Defenders struggled to locate the source of the attack, their eyes dazzled by the tracers, their ears ringing from the barrage. The confusion was total. Searchlights swung wildly, failing to find moving targets. Machine gunners fired blindly into the night, hoping to hit something, anything. The Vickers K's solid stream of bullets erased targets before defenders could even focus. In the chaos, German troops found themselves paralysed, unable to coordinate a response or even shout a warning that would cut through the noise. In the space of a few heartbeats, the airfield's routine was shattered by a force that overwhelmed every sense, leaving defenders disoriented and powerless. German commanders in North Africa faced a new kind of threat they had never anticipated. Airfields that once felt secure behind the front lines now stood exposed to sudden violence. After the first jeep raids, orders went out across Luftwaffe bases. Aircraft were to be parked farther apart, not in neat rows. Night sentries doubled, with extra men assigned to fuel dumps and dispersal areas. Barbed wire and mines ringed the most vulnerable approaches, and engineers dug fresh trenches for emergency defence. Reports from Sidi Haneish and other attacked fields describe the same pattern. Jeeps appearing out of the darkness, pouring fire into parked aircraft, then vanishing before defenders could respond. German rear area patrols were reorganised. Motorised detachments began sweeping the desert tracks at irregular hours, searching for signs of British movement. Roadblocks and checkpoints multiplied along key supply routes, and every guard post received new instructions to trigger alarms at the first hint of engine noise or gunfire. Commanders issued standing orders for rapid reaction. Flak crews were told to be ready to engage ground targets as well as aircraft, and telephone lines linked sentry posts directly to command huts. The old habit of treating rear areas as safe dissolved. Every night men patrolled the perimeter with machine guns at the ready, scanning the darkness for the next sudden attack. The cost of these changes was steep. Manpower that once fueled the German advance now guarded airfields and supply depots. Mechanics and ground crews lost hours to sentry duty, and the fear of another raid hung over every shift. The reality was clear. Distance from the front no longer meant safety, and every night demanded vigilance. No weapon is perfect, and the Vickers K came with a price that every raider in North Africa felt in their bones and supply lines. The gun's greatest strength, its furious rate of fire, was also its most demanding flaw. A 100-round drum magazine emptied at full speed lasted barely 5 or 6 seconds. In a typical raid, gunners cycled through magazines so quickly that reloads became as much a part of the attack as the firing itself. Each change took a practiced hand 3 to 5 seconds, but those seconds added up fast when every burst drained a drum. Jeep crews packed their vehicles with biscuit tins full of loaded pans, but even the best prepared patrol could burn through their entire stockpile before the target was fully destroyed. Armourers and quartermasters faced a constant battle to keep up. Every raid meant scouring depots and crashed aircraft for spare drums, and every patrol had to balance ammunition against fuel, water and demolition charges. The 303 British rounds that fed the Vickers K were heavy and bulky in their steel pans, and a single jeep might carry dozens, yet in the chaos of a night attack that ammunition would vanish in minutes. Supply officers learned quickly that the gun's appetite could outstrip even the most generous resupply plans. When the shooting started, logistics became a race against the clock and the heat. Overheating was a silent enemy. The K's air-cooled barrel, designed for the slipstream of a moving aircraft, could only handle so much before the metal began to glow and accuracy faltered. In the desert, with no airflow, and the gun spitting out 20 rounds a second, barrels grew blistering hot. Gunners learned to fire in short, savage bursts, never holding the trigger long enough to risk a jam or a cook-off. Prolonged firefights were out of the question. The gun was built for moments of violence, not minutes. If a raid dragged on, the risk of failure rose with every passing second. Surprise was the gun's shield. The Vickers K was a weapon for ambush and shock, not for holding ground. If the enemy was warned or the attack bogged down, the gun's flaws became impossible to ignore. Magazine changes slowed the rate of fire, overheating limited sustained use, and ammunition vanished faster than it could be replaced. In a static defense, the K was almost useless. Its high rate of fire wasted when targets were few, and time was not an enemy. Only in the brief window of a hit-and-run assault did its strengths outweigh its costs. The result was a weapon that demanded careful planning and ruthless discipline. Armourers worked overtime to keep guns and magazines clean, supply teams sweated over every round, and gunners drilled reloads until their hands moved without thinking. The K's legacy was built not just on firepower, but on the constant effort behind the scenes, the hidden cost paid by everyone who kept the gun firing, if only for a few seconds at a time. Few weapons have left such a lasting impression with so little presence on the battlefield. The Vickers K never appeared in massed ranks or filled the pages of official war diaries by the thousand. Its production numbers were modest, designed for flexible aircraft mounts. It never received the vast contracts of the Bren or Browning. Most of the guns that found their way to the desert were surplus, phased out by the Royal Air Force as newer belt-fed guns took over. In the ledgers of the Ministry of Supply, the K was a minority player, never the backbone of any standard infantry unit, rarely seen outside elite circles. Yet for the men of the Special Air Service and the Long-Range Desert Group, it became more than a tool, it was a symbol of their entire approach to war. The K's reputation grew not from quantity, but from the sheer audacity of its use. In the hands of small, mobile teams, it demonstrated that firepower could outweigh numbers, that speed and shock could achieve what larger armies could not. Patrols equipped with just a handful of jeeps and a few K-guns could erase entire lines of aircraft, disrupt supply convoys, and force the enemy to rethink every assumption about security. The gun's mechanical violence, its ability to deliver a wall of bullets in seconds, became the signature of British special operations in North Africa. The sound alone was enough to unsettle defenders, and the aftermath, rows of burned-out aircraft and scattered fuel drums, spoke louder than any propaganda leaflet. This legacy extended well beyond the desert. The lessons learned with the Vickers K shaped how special forces thought about mobility and firepower for decades to come. The concept of mounting heavy automatic weapons on fast, lightly armoured vehicles found echoes in post-war doctrine, from commando raids in Europe to the gun trucks of later conflicts. The K proved that a small, well-led force with the right weapon could punch far above its weight, an idea that would influence not only British units but special operations worldwide. Selective issue reinforced the gun's mystique. Only a fraction of the total production ever reached the Special Air Service, the Long-Range Desert Group, or commandos, and those who used it often became legends in their own right. The K's presence in photographs, jeeps bristling with twin or quadruple mounts, gunners standing exposed in the open, became shorthand for a new kind of warfare. It was never a general issue weapon, but that scarcity only added to its aura. In the institutional memory of British special operations, the Vickers K remains a touchstone, not because it was perfect, but because it embodied the ruthless, improvisational spirit that defined the war's most daring raids. Its influence can be traced in every modern doctrine that values speed, surprise, and overwhelming force at the critical moment, even if the gun itself has long since faded from active service. Today, military doctrine still chases the edge between speed and shock, proof that raw firepower can upend even the strongest defences. The Vickers K's legacy lives in every raid that values mobility over mass. As new conflicts demand unpredictability, the lessons of desert nights echo louder than ever, and security is never as certain as it seems. Share your thoughts and join the discussion.